All right, let's jump right into this explainer of Crysticism, Christocode 937.2, the Absolver's audit. Picture this. Two typical 25-year-olds, Abby and Evan, just hanging out in their normal clothes in this incredibly vibrant, serene setting, and they are completely getting into the weeds on modern theological dogmas. On one side, we've got Abby. She represents the mindset of an absolver. And on the other side is Evan, her highly analytical, skeptical peer. This whole discussion is a fascinating deep dive audit into the mechanics of what supposedly happens when we leave this world. It really asks us to set aside our preconceptions for a few minutes and look at belief through a totally structured, logical lens. So what exactly happens when your supposedly ironclad, guaranteed afterlife contract has a massive logical loophole in the fine print? We are going to explore the cognitive dissonance between wanting eternal comfort and facing the stark, strict mechanics of cosmic logic. On one hand, you have this very comforting narrative of an all-inclusive ticket to paradise, but then you read the fine print. The logical implications of mass-produced souls, divine accountability, the actual mechanics of cosmic debt. What happens when you hold these beliefs up to the light of basic reasoning? Let's find out.
Section 1. The appeal of blind faith. The desire for simple answers. Look, we all know the appeal, right? This maps out why someone like Abby in our source material might just trade in critical thinking for the promise of effortless eternal peace. She literally says she doesn't want to be intimidated by big, complex questions she can't answer. The end goal is simple: instant, guaranteed results. By leaning entirely on so-called infallible interpreters, even when those interpreters totally contradict each other, an absolver successfully eliminates the stress of grappling with the universe's biggest mysteries. And just listen to this quote from the text. "I want to feel right and everyone else wrong. My blind beliefs override logic, truth, law." Talk about protective armor, right? It's a fascinating psychological shield against the unknown. When your mindset is that your beliefs automatically trump logic and truth, you've completely insulated yourself from doubt. It boosts your confidence, it calms you down. As Evan points out, replacing a terrifying question with an unverified belief is a pretty effective way to just relax. Moving on to Section 2, escaping personal accountability, transferring the burden of action. Here's where Evan, our resident skeptic, really pushes back. The text compares the absolver's craving for this guaranteed automatic afterlife against Evan's view, which he bluntly calls a kindergarten consciousness. The absolver is essentially transferring all their accountability, past, present, and future, over to a savior. Evan argues they are entirely removing themselves from the equation of cosmic law, just expecting an automatic reward for buying into a doctrine sold by a divine salesman. Which brings up a pretty intense, heavy question. If a savior has already taken the blame for absolutely every bad thing you do, what's stopping society from completely unraveling? Evan asks this directly. If you believe your negative actions aren't actually sinful anymore because the consequences have magically been erased, doesn't that loophole of non-accountability just pave the way for fanatical, self-righteous behavior? Okay, let's look at the numbers. Section 3. The math of unborn souls. A statistical audit of creation. This is where the logic gets really, really sticky. The dialogue shifts to the friction of a system judging souls who never even took a single breath. The dogma claims the Creator decides your eternity based on one lifetime and that your soul is stamped into existence at the exact moment of conception. But if we look at basic biology, it tells a vastly different story about how often conception actually equals a lived human life. To put this into perspective, we're talking about a cosmic factory producing 90 million unborn souls every single year. Seriously, look at these stats. Out of roughly 225 million global pregnancies annually, only 135 million result in live births. That leaves 40 million miscarriages and 50 million abortions. If the doctrine claims half the population ends up condemned, well, millions of these unlived souls every year would theoretically be doomed. Abby's defense here? She just claims the all-merciful Creator automatically makes these unlived souls perfect and fast-tracks them to heaven.
And zeroing in on miscarriages specifically, that represents a 20% failure rate of human biology. That is a staggering statistic if an all-knowing Creator is micromanaging the process. I mean, Evan hits the nail on head. No company could stay in business if 20% of its products were instantly defective off the assembly line. It absolutely forces you to ask, is this biological termination the fault of the human, or a flaw in the Creator's design?
Exactly. When facts don't add up, there's something wrong with the facts. It's that simple. This massive anomaly, 90 million souls a year completely bypassing the supposed earthly test, leads Evan to suggest a huge structural flaw in the absolver's narrative. When the biological reality totally clashes with the theological framework, it shatters the comforting idea that everything is being perfectly, flawlessly managed from above.
All right, Section 4, the magic sin eraser, the mechanics of cosmic debt.
The mechanics of this are wild. It's almost like sci-fi logic. Abby describes this as a virtual time portal transaction. So a modern sin is committed, right? And supposedly, that debt is magically beamed back in time, 2,000 years, and dumped onto a savior as he suffers. He's the ultimate cosmic scapegoat. Then his righteousness is beamed forward through time and placed inside the believer to perfectly mask their corruption. Evan is just blown away by the absurdity of this bargain, arguing that roughly 3 hours of physical bleeding somehow mathematically undoes the eternal cosmic debt for billions of people. Abby essentially pictures this doctrine as a magic washing machine. You toss your dirty, torn-up spiritual clothes into this time portal machine, and boom, they instantly come out as a gorgeous, brand-new wardrobe. Instead of putting in the rigorous work to actually achieve perfection, the believer is just automatically wiped clean and declared perfect by default. But Evan is not having it. He asks the obvious question, well, what happened to the old clothes? What happens to your hidden, darker nature? If a duplicate of someone else's righteousness is just draped over your broken personality to hide it from the Creator's eyes, your corruption hasn't gone anywhere. You haven't evolved. You haven't grown. You're literally just hiding under a really nice coat. Which brings us to our final paradigm shift. Section 5, Craving Spiritual Maturity. Beyond the permanent vacation. Evan argues that a truly advanced, infinitely expanding cosmic kingdom wouldn't need a bunch of unskilled servants who spent their only lifetime avoiding hard questions. It would need experienced professionals. It needs master alchemists, miracle workers, healers. A functional, dynamic cosmic operation requires individual, creative, free souls who've actually put in the rigorous work to become capable. This quote is brutal, but so good. His kingdom doesn't need choir boys or spiritual socialists on permanent vacation. Let that sink in. Having someone else erase your debts leaves you completely 100% unprepared for actual divine responsibility. If your whole goal was just to score an unearned luxury retirement in the sky, Evan argues you offer absolutely zero functional value to a creator trying to run a working universe. It's all about making that shift. Evolving from that kindergarten consciousness we talked about earlier into becoming a literal, mighty warrior. Stepping away from the delusion of a totally effortless afterlife is the first step toward actual self-mastery. True divine gifts aren't handed out as participation trophies for blind obedience. They have to be earned by souls willing to face complex truths and build their own internal strength. So we are left with this lingering, provocative thought at the end of the explainer. As we watch Abby's blind faith get pierced by these undeniably bright threads of logic, we have to ask ourselves, once you truly audit your own beliefs and confront the staggering questions of the universe, can you ever just go back to sleep? When a new frequency of truth vibrates in your soul, can you ever unhear it? Do you choose the permanent vacation, or do you finally do the work?